silence your cell phones. And reorganization of the board takes place for the election of a president and vice president and the setting of dates and times of meetings for the coming year. Section 402 of the school code states there should be elected from the holdover members the temporary president, chair of the reorganization meeting, and the secretary of the board shall act as secretary of such meeting. So at this point, do I have a motion for a temporary president?
I make a motion to nominate Dr. Stephen Scollett as temporary president of your suburban school.
I'll second the motion.
Do I have any others? And I will appoint Dr. Scollett to be the temporary president.
Okay, thank you. The first item is to read the certificates of election and administer the oath of office. Okay, so do we need to have the certificates read, or should I just go forward with the oath of office? Okay. All right, so I'm going to read what I see here. Okay, so this is we, the undersigned, members of the York County Board of Elections hereby certify that after tabulating the votes cast at the municipal election held on November 5th, 2019, that John H. Posnow is duly elected to the office of school director for a 4-year term for the York Suburban School District, as was Richard Robinson, Lois Ann Schrader, and Joel L. Sears. And? Oh, and, finally. All right, now I'm going to read the oath of office. And please repeat after me. Yes. I do solemnly swear or affirm.
I do solemnly swear
That I will support, obey, and defend.
that I will support, obey, and defend
The Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States
And the Constitution of this Commonwealth.
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth.
And that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
And I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Thank you.
Once again.
Congratulations. Wild cheer.
Okay, our next item of business is electing a board president. I will now open the floor.
Whoa, wait a minute. We have to do a roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Fryrick?
Here.
Mr. Posnow?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Mr. Scollett?
Here.
Mrs. Schrader?
Here.
Mr. Sears?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
And Mr. Toman?
Here.
Okay, the next item is public comment. All comments and questions will be addressed to the temporary president. Board and staff members will not normally respond to comments or questions during the meeting unless recognized by the temporary president for this purpose. Comments will be limited at the discretion of the president to 5 minutes or less. Are there any comments? Okay, thank you. Now we're on to electing a board president. I will now open the floor for nominations for board president.
Nomination committee, would like to bring forward, Mr. Posnow.
Thank you.
Second.
Are there any other nominations? If none, the nominations are now closed. Mr. Posnow, do you accept the nomination to be board president?
I
those in favor of Mr. Posnow as board president indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying no. Well, congratulations. Mr. Posnow is now elected as board president. That's it.
Tight, scripted.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to the election of a vice president. We have a nomination.
Nomination committee would like to nominate Roseanne Schrader as vice president.
Second.
Other nominations? I guess this can be unanimous roll call vote. Will you do it?
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Both of them.
So I guess you have the meeting schedule, or the list of the meetings that are available coming up. Over the next few days, if you can get to me your preferences for committees, and we'll try to form the committee meetings. I would have a proposal that we merge facilities and finance in one meeting, so one committee. That's where we've been going through the people who represent, yes.
We need to vote on the board schedule
Okay.
before you talk about the committees.
Okay. All right, so before we talk about that, you have before you the meeting schedule, the planned committees and regular monthly meetings, a link. The administration recommends approval of the meeting schedule for 2020. All times are at 7 p.m. in the place where meetings are held in the Brevard Education Center unless advertised otherwise. We have a motion to accept that.
So moved.
Second. Questions or comments? A short roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Back to the original point. That would be the only change I would recommend in the committee. So I have a questions or comments?
I support that. Having served on both committees, I think there's a lot of overlap, and we end up talking about the same issues, and we cover an awful lot of the same detail twice. Then we bring it to the board for planning and for approval. So it's really sometimes 3 passes of the same issue, where maybe 2 would be just as efficient, and maybe more efficient.
Will we have to do something with our policy?
Yes.
So that would have to take place soon. Oh, okay. Well, that discussion is appropriate. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I think what you say makes sense, Joel. A lot of, I mean, facilities can't do anything without the, finance committee go-ahead, so it makes sense to, in my mind, I mean, it'll be a little bit of shift in, paradigm in the way we've done things, but change is good sometimes too.
It may require a longer scheduled time for the combined meeting, but my sense is it's not going to be the same total amount of time invested.
Right.
You can see, and I guess it's one of those that could be reversed if we find out it's not productive.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm opposed to that combination. I believe that Finance Committee, in theory, affects every single committee we have. Every personnel decision we make, every academic standard decision we make is ultimately a finance issue. That does not mean that those should be discussed at a finance meeting. To combine those two committees, both have very extensive things to talk about. They are not all about the money affecting what you do with facilities. And I think that downgrades the discussion that will occur on the actual facilities discussion, or it lessens the amount of time that gets spent on the finance discussion. So I personally am not in favor of that. I'm not necessarily in favor of having lots of meetings, but in my world, we wouldn't have any committees. We would meet as a full board and discuss everything as the full board, and that would save time. But I am not in favor of the combination of those two committees. And I serve on both of them.
Well, just to third way of doing things. I think we got down to the real nuts and bolts, so to speak, at the committee level more than we did at the committee of the whole. And it may have been largely due to time. I mean, if you think about the kind of time we spend at the committee, if we all did that together at planning, we'd be here till, 10 or 11 o'clock. So maybe that's neither good nor bad, but just from a historical standpoint.
I'll support what Mike has said, and you're absolutely right. Our meetings used to go much longer, and we were having, I've liked the amount of information we get sometimes at the committee meetings, although they tend to get very long, and recently we've been trying to schedule 2 at one time, which I don't favor at all. 2 on one day, that was definitely, to my way of thinking, has not worked out particularly well over the last several months. But I have a fear that if we put the 2 committees together, we're going to be talking about the finances all the time, sort of kind of what Mike was saying, and then we're not looking at the facilities and what we need and what we think we need for the educational purposes, and then finding the money to do it. So I think there does have to be a certain amount of separation there, and if the only way to do it is to have 2 separate committees, maybe that's, the way to go.
Other thoughts, comments?
I think some of the concerns are legit. I really am able to take that in. I don't think, though, that putting the 2 committees together necessarily excludes other aspects of finance, and that through good construction of agendas, you can move the meetings to emphasize what needs to be emphasized. We're not always consumed with facility financing in the finance meeting, and we're not always consumed with facility financing in the facilities meeting, or are we? And that one's where it always seems to come up. It's not just construction, it's always about money. There's never a facilities meeting that I've attended where money isn't an issue. Whereas the other way with finance, it's, facilities part of it, but it doesn't consume the meeting. Because we obviously have the financing of the district to take into account. So I think managing the agenda is a way to deal with that.
I think that we've already moved a good bit of our conversation out of facilities, and justifiably so, to the board level, that we're talking about the future and our future needs. We decided that was a good thing that should come directly to the board, so we weren't spending time in committee and then waiting and bringing it forth to the full board. But I think there are more yearly projects and other projects that go on that are worthy of just talking about facilities, possibly managing it better through the agenda. I don't know, but then those meetings that we've had that have been combined have tended to be very long, lengthy meetings in and of themselves on those Wednesdays. So I'd rather see them kept separate for the time being.
I've heard yes and no. Is there a motion to move these 2 together?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Discussion? Additional discussion? Can we have a roll call?
Sure. Sears,
Yes.
Schrader,
Yes.
Scolette,
No.
Sanders,
No.
Robinson,
Yes.
Toman,
No.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Fryrick.
No.
5 yeses, 4 noes.
Thank you. So again, if you will get, let me see, I'll get it filled out, and the committee put together.
Look at the timeline for that.
Right here it says on the agenda by 5 o'clock. before the following meeting or after the meeting?
There's one correction.
Okay.
Mr. Sanders is from Brooks High School Technology Department.
There is one more committee that got slipped in here. It's a representative for the Spring Garden Township Parks and Recreation.
What? What?
Spring Garden Township Parks and Recreation Commission.
Yeah, we're in Spring Garden, to be honest.
I don't know. I'm thinking yes.
That's not a bad idea.
That's what it's like these joint operating committees, aren't those, shouldn't you be a member of the joint operating committee and not be a school board member?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct. I know it's true for the LIU joint.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's through the JOA over at the.
I suspect the Spring Garden would be a little more restrictive.
Yeah, exactly. I was just saying, because those committees then stand, stuff like that.
Who's the Spring Garden? So I guess this will be the last opportunity for public comment in the reorg meeting. So then with that, I guess the reorg meeting is adjourned. Thank you. We can begin the planning meeting with a call to order. And again, this is your first opportunity for public comment. All comments and questions will be addressed to the president. Board and staff members will not normally respond to comments or questions during the meeting unless recognized by the president for this purpose. Comments will be limited at the discretion of the president, 5 minutes or less. And you have the minutes here for the regular monthly meeting of November 18th. Do we have any changes or corrections? I think they can be approved as submitted. The board met prior to this meeting in executive session as permitted by section 707 of the Sunshine Act for the purpose of discussing matters of personnel. No official action was taken. Items recommended for approval on December 16th will be the adoption of the PA School Board Association's Principles for Governance and Leadership, which is linked on this document.
Item A, the recommended for approval on December 16th meeting, the administration recommended approval of proposed 2020-21 school calendar.
As it stands now, I will not support this calendar. I have some issues with it. I'm starting to see that we have, eliminated, Veterans Day, honoring veterans, and assuming that's one of those days allows you then to keep the same end of the school year, 180 days, if I'm correct looking at this. But I have some questions, that, Dr. Sullivan wanted an extra day in December so he could get home for the holidays. I'd sure like to have an extra day to get ready for my holidays, which most of you don't even know when they fall or what they are, but it would be really nice. And I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and I have lived through this as hearing the stories of my parents, myself, and my children, and the issues that they have faced when we try and get them to take off days for the Jewish religious holidays. Every year there's some parents that say, my kids don't even talk about stress because they're afraid they're going to miss this test, or they're going to miss an assignment that's due. And I just think that, we talk about appreciating diversity and the differences in our school, but I feel it's time that we, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But if the 23rd of December stays as a holiday, I will not be voting for this.
And reports from the other comments.
Midterm exams. And I know this is going, I don't know where they fall this year, whether they're before or after the holiday. Before the holiday, kids all are happy about that. After the holiday, kids are all
universally having to sit through your vacation, come back to school, have 3 A's. I wouldn't like it, and I think we should work harder to figure out how to make that happen before the holidays. The year that it did happen, it was great, and, I heard the years that it's not been that way as complaining.
Speak to it, Brian. Certainly, it is my goal going forward to continue to have it before the holidays. It is before the holidays this year. It is the Thursday and Friday before break, and on this calendar, it would be my intention to be on the 21st and the 22nd, or if something were to change on the 23rd, it would be the last 2 days prior to break. The reason we moved it back a year ago was because our calendar got started a lot later. So we would have been given the midterms on the 79th, 80th, 81st day of the term, which is a little bit out of skew. But overwhelmingly, the feedback was poor last year in terms of it going back to that point. So it's our intention as administration to continue to have it before break, unless we have an exceptionally different calendar than we've had over the last number of years. So even though it's not posted there, it's my intention for the 21st and the 22nd.
So we'll make that.
So it's on the calendar as the 7th and 8th.
In 2 weeks, we would expect to see how.
We'll edit that, yeah.
And I wanted to ask about the early dismissals. There's one every month, are those what I'm thinking of, is that 80 days, and is that not a sort of a change historically for suburban? I guess I'm just wondering why.
Sure. That is for professional development time. We, as you know, professional development time is a premium to get. Certainly, I would say over the last 4 to 5 years, we've noticed a greater need to develop staff. Certainly, as we bring in a younger staff with less seasoned opportunity to professionally develop them, having to use that time, we're limited by what the association puts into their collective bargaining agreement. So something that I think teachers will respond to that's consistent throughout the course of the year that we can plan for and implement, that's steady throughout the year, is the use of that professional development time. Historically, we've done it a couple different ways. Years ago, I believe it started at the high school where they had kind of that late start, 2-hour delay, then we moved into the Saturdays, both early dismissals, then late afternoons. So choosing to add those 2 extra ones, maybe just consistently spread out each month, add a little bit more systematic planning for both the teachers and the administrators as they plan their monthly schedule.
My concern, in your statement, time well spent.
Absolutely.
I think I'd add that one of the topics that came out of a recent meeting with the association was a real desire for additional training, opportunities to do it, so.
And that's where a lot of it came from.
I just want that clarification. I'm not opposed to the calendar necessarily. I just want clarification. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and feedback. Okay. And have a also advisory report. Administrative report.
Hello. Thank you for having me tonight. I addressed this a little bit when I first introduced some of our initiatives, but I really wanted to hone in on what we are doing at the primary level with social emotional learning. I believe it was brought up at a committee level, maybe with Miranda in attendance, and the question was raised, what is going on at the primary level, elementary level in terms of social and emotional learning? We do a bang-up job with our reading and writing and arithmetic, but we are realizing with each passing year that we really do need to address the social and emotional needs of the students. So we have 3 initiatives that are running kind of simultaneously. The first is a grant that we got through Patient First, which gives us online yoga videos that the teachers can use at their discretion within the classroom. Last year we had a couple teachers along with our guidance counselor pilot it. Worked very well. They're very easy to use. The kids come back from recess or lunchtime and they need something to either calm them down or maybe it's after an assessment of some sort and they need something to bring them up. So there's an array of yoga videos that they can select from. Again, that's from a Patient First grant that we've been fortunate to get pretty much every year. The next is from a grant that we were able to get through Title IV funding. And to get the Title IV funding, it had to fall into various categories, one of them being social-emotional. So Wynn Kinder is a consultant. She does a lot of consulting in the Lancaster County schools, but we are so fortunate that we've been able to get her at Yorkshire. She's been at Yorkshire for 2 half-days of training. Again, through the grant, we were able to bring in substitutes so that the teachers could really spend time with Wynn to help themselves understand the feeling and what it means to be mindful. Truly, in order to bring this into our classrooms, we as the adults need to understand what that feels like so that we can help our children get into that peaceful state. So Wynn has been doing training with us. She has provided us through the funding with resources. She's actually going to be at Yorkshire tomorrow morning for our faculty meeting, helping us understand trauma-informed schools. So we are fortunate that she is a wonderful resource, which is basically in our backyard. And then finally, our guidance counselors really have been in charge of this social-emotional over the years. They've been going into classrooms and doing lessons with students, but now we need it to be something that the teachers understand and embrace. So Chris Forney, our guidance counselor, found this Sanford Harmony, which is a research-based social-emotional curriculum. There's a primary kindergarten kit, and then there's a kit that's for first and second grade. But basically, it is what teachers can use in their morning meeting as a way of setting that foundation in communication, community building within their class, or they can use it as a closing circle at the end of the day. So what we are finding that in order to get to our academics, we really do have to be addressing the social-emotional being of our students and also our faculties as well. So this is where we are dabbling and really trying to get our heads wrapped around of how this builds into just our daily practices. So thank you, Dr. Krauser, for professional development. Obviously, this is an area of need for us. Thank you.
Certainly, my major report may come a little bit later, is the opportunity to talk with all of you about the class rank piece and the course proposals. I appreciate all the time that I'm sure you put into reviewing some of the work that I did over the course of the last year with my colleagues and administrators. I know I put a lot in front of you over the course of the last 3 academic standards meetings for you to consider. So I look forward to hearing your discussion and answer any questions that come from that. But beyond that, I want to share a little bit some neat things that are happening, and thank you for supporting bringing Heidi Hayes-Jacobs here with the board action a little while back. Her message has really spurred a lot of ideas and thinking within the high school faculty. I'm pleased to work with, I sort of have 2 groups that I work closely with teaching faculty. I have what I call the Faculty Advisory Council, which works more on the operations side, logistics and so forth, to help steer me in the right direction for that piece. And my department chairs serve very much as sort of my faculty senate. They're really talking about the academic leadership, the decisions that we're making around the building, and I've been working with them along with a subset of them which makes up our High Quality Teaching and Learning Committee, the HQTL acronym that Dr. Krauser's talked about. So it's been great to work with them multiple times over the course of this fall, just to come up with some ideas and to think about how we move ourselves forward. One of our first steps, we looked at the possibility of developing a profile of a graduate. It's something a lot of schools have been doing to sort of put up front what are those big picture things that we want all our students to be able to do when they graduate. Not that they can pass 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 3 years of social studies, but more importantly, what are those broader kind of ideas? And we came back around to 8 different concepts that we want to build our whole high school around. Those 8 concepts, and forgive me, I'm not going to know them from memory, but decision-making, content mastery, citizenship, critical thinking, effective communication, independence, interdependence, as well as wellness. And the idea that everything that we do in the high school should center in helping students advance in one of those areas. Then the whole idea of the interdisciplinary study, that they're focused towards that area. So it's been exciting to have those discussions and develop it. We've also been talking about grading practices in our high school, whether Heidi Hayes Jacobs used the idea, are our ideas, are they antiquated, are they contemporary, or are they classical? Meaning, are they antiquated things that are from the past that need to move along because they're no longer appropriate for our students? The contemporary being those new things that we have to create to help our students move forward, and those classical things that have always been around that we should be maintaining. So we've been using that frame as we talk about a lot of different things, and grading was one of those topics, even down to the idea, are marking periods even appropriate any longer? We have marking periods because we needed to give report cards to parents 50 years ago about how students were doing. It's morphed into a different structure now where parents have 365 days, 7 or 24 hours down to 60 minutes. I mean, you get your updates as soon as you want them when the teacher puts the grades in. So is that reporting necessary, and is there a better way to handle it? Those I've taught at the college level, they don't have marking periods at the college level. They can average different things in, and even down to the idea that the midterm needing to be at the midpoint of the year, just because of it being 10% of the grade, we could skew that in different ways. So the teachers are really talking a little bit differently about how we do things. Some change may come about that we bring to you. Some change may simply say, no, that's not appropriate for our kids. But it's great to have those discussions about how to continue to try to grow and advance our high school. So I look forward to just bringing some of that forward to all of you in the months and years to come.
Do you have any opinions on that?
On?
Grading?
Yes, I certainly do. Certainly, I honestly think as a former math teacher, I used to work to skew my grade books to make sure that I was trying to have each marking period count the same. If I had that one marking period where I had 3 tests, the next marking period I might only have 1 just because of the content. I wanted to make sure that that 1 test was worth the same amount as those 3 tests. But I had to skew my grade books to try to make that happen because of the marking period structure. I've also questioned the idea of, I work with students 180 days out of the year. Why are the last 45 worth the same amount as the first 45? I put in a lot of work and effort that first 45, that first 90, to make the work in the 4th marking period the most important work when they've grown and they continue to go. So should the 4th marking period not be worth more content to it? And I liken that to the English teacher. I hope they don't grade the first essay the same as they grade the last essay. They would expect a lot more out of the student on that last essay, should that not be worth. So that's just some of the pieces there, but within that also is just the idea of, is or even our grading system relevant in terms of there is certainly a large portion of the grade, and each teacher is a little bit different based upon just being a good student, completing things, learning things on time, and so forth. Class participation, those things that are very, very important, but they're not necessarily the same as getting a 95% on the calculus test. So there's even some schools that have created dual grade books where there is a pure academic grade in every class, and then there's also a skill-based grade in terms of students getting feedback on how they do career skills or those kind of things that employers necessarily look. So it's an interesting topic to talk about, and I certainly have a lot of opinions on it. I'm trying to give the teachers opportunities to develop their own, and then we'll come together to maybe bring a different proposal to all of you in the future.
The profile of the graduate, those broader ideas
Yes.
that you listed, are those the kinds of things that are going to be, how will the students know these and get to know these?
Sure. There's a multi-step process to it. In many ways, it's kind of like the value statements that it's not up anymore. Or is it hidden behind something? The value statements of our strategic plan and so forth with our mission and vision. So to a degree, they're like that. It's the first step in the understanding by design structure that we're going to be working towards for curriculum. They call the big picture transfer goals, the big umbrella that everything needs to fit in. So once we've developed them, and we're ahead of the game, the high school, just because of our access to the teachers and our flexibility of scheduling, those will be vetted by the entire district. So Dr. Stoltz's Yorkshire teachers will have as much of a say as to whether or not that's appropriate. And then they become the overriding goals. And from there, all our course goals break down from that. So the Algebra 2 teacher is trying to focus on helping develop those. At the same time, the kindergarten teacher, in a different fashion, is trying to develop those. An example in terms of a communication goal and effective communication, the kindergartner can write a persuasive essay just as the senior can. Now, obviously, it's going to look very different. It's going to be graded differently, but the kindergartner is going to advocate for why they want to have apples at lunchtime, whereas the high schooler might be taking on a political position about gun rights or abortion or whatever else it may be to persuade. But they're all working towards that communication goal over their careers. So it's the first step in that curriculum development is to build those big picture pieces. Then we'll look at the course level or grade level as to what those goals will be. and then you break it down into the day-by-day lesson planning and unit planning.
I like
That
that.
happens. Okay.
Thank you. The first item I'm asking for, the administration recommends board approval to advertise and solicit bids for snow removal. What's that?
Can we solicit a bid from God on this? There won't be any snow at all. Second.
Questions or comments?
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you for that. The rest of the items under B 1 through 7 are items we would be looking for approval at the December 16th meeting. These were talked about, the first one was talked about at Finance. This was actually brought back again a second time with gaining more information, so it will be the bowling as a club program starting in 2021. Item 2 is the Wisehaven event contract for the academic awards to be held in May. This is an annual approval that we do. Third item is the MOU with Allegheny Intermediate Unit for voice interpretation services with TransPerfect. This is also an annual renewal that we do. And these fees for them are the same as last year. The fourth item, the board approval to transfer $1,354,853.43 from the general fund operating checking to the insurance account checking. This is the amount that we got from LBT, and if you remember when we built the budget, we built the revenue side. We also built the expense side because we had to transfer it to insurance through our agreement with LBT. But we all agreed it would be best if we put it in that budgetary reserve line item so the board knew when we got the money, approved the transfer, and knew that's what the money was going for. So that's what that line item covers. Item 5 is the approval to transfer $500,000 to the capital reserve fund as presented at the time of the 18-19 audit. In the past, we have approved the audit and the transfer at the same time. This time I just split them. Item 6 is the board approval to deny the request that was made by attorney Margaret A. Driscoll on behalf of the client Jessica and Friends Community to exonerate the taxes for the 1920 tax year for the property on Scarborough Drive. And item 7 is the administration recommends board approval of the contract with IU13 for language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. Module 1 training on February 14th, 2020 for a total cost of $1,050, and travel mileage outside of that particular IU region, which totals $32.48. That is a new contract. Any questions?
Can we have a little bit of information about what these language essentials are? What's contained in this course?
I will refer to Dr. Ketterman.
It's basically, the LETTERS program is an 8-module program. It talks about the science of reading, and it gets into then in different modules about how to instruct in phonics and phonemic awareness and fluency and comprehension. But the first module is the one that really is the basis for all other modules, and you can't receive any of the other training until you get this module that talks really about the science in the brain and how it learns reading that. So we want to give that opportunity for all of our K-2 teachers on our upcoming in-service day.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question on B2? Why do we have that off-site? The academic award for what?
I can't answer that. It's been off-site since I've been here.
Have you attended?
I have not. I'm just
I would say experientially, I can't think of a way to accommodate that here within the footprint of the district. It's
I'm not sure we have to do that.
So large, years ago, it used to be a sit-down dinner for everybody, so it just became a sit-down town, it's a nice deal. His parents,
But is it our cost is $12.75 a person, or it's?
Yes.
So just out of curiosity, what has been the typical total cost for this event?
I would and I don't have the number directly.
I don't
It's
either.
between probably $12,000 and $15,000
Okay.
to present the awards to the students, as
Right.
well as pay for the appetizers, programs, and the other things that are associated.
It's the Super Bowl of academics in this district, and it's very, very much worthwhile.
Insanely appreciated.
Okay. Budget presentation? You asked if that was it. As my final presentation, I...
Reject it, does that mean you'll come back?
No. I'm just presenting it. Kathy has to work with it. Okay, so our current enrollment, this is as of November 1st, is 3,341 students. If you look at our enrollment history, we have continued to grow. The years 2011-12 to 2018-19, those are actually reportable ADMs, which is average daily membership. And those numbers are the numbers that now drive our basic ed subsidy. It's part of the formulary that's involved with that. So we are back to paying close attention as to what we are reporting on our ADMs, because we know it now means something again. We went through a spell there where it didn't mean anything. Not that we sloughed off, but we just are paying even more close attention now to what we're reporting. Again, the November 1st, which is in the 1920 column, is 3,341. Last year at this time when I gave the presentation in January, that January number was 3,253. So our numbers are going up. The revenue history, in the revenue, we'll look at the history, the projected revenues, the revenue sources, and what's impacting the revenue for 2021. The revenue history, 2011-12 through 2018-19, those are all audited numbers. Then you'll see for 19-20, it's our budget number of $64,671,000. And for the projection number for 2021, the number is actually down $64,389,000. And as I go through the presentation, I will explain why the revenue is down, because that is an anomaly for us. And one of the things you have to remember too, this is a snapshot as of right now. Between now and when you finally approve the budget, these numbers, both revenue and expense, will change. Actually, behind the scenes, they change daily, but for you, they'll change at finance, they'll change at planning, and they'll change at the board meeting. If we look at the first revenue source, which is our biggest source, that's the local revenue. Right now, that's totaling $52.9 million. And I broke it out into our biggest pieces, if you will, that make up it, which is our real estate tax. That's about $41.5 million. Our interest income, we're taking that down next year back to the $308,000. We do not think we'll see what we saw the latter part of 18-19 and what we're seeing here in the beginning of 19-20. Our real estate transfer tax, we did up that for this year. Right now we're budgeting a number of $750,000. Delinquent real estate taxes, we're keeping at $600,000. Our earned income, we're currently keeping that at 3.6. If you recall, during our budget discussions, that had been trending up, but as with our last report from Al Timko at the Tax Bureau, two of our big businesses, if you will, that help bring that number up, they have now left. So he fully anticipates that number to remain or possibly even go down. So he's going to be keep monitoring that for us.
What were the two businesses?
One was the hospital, and I don't remember the other one. I can find that out from him, but I do remember he said one of your biggest one being the hospital. He said there were two, but I can find that out and pass it on to the board. And then the other local revenue, it's tax related. We have payment in lieu of taxes, which is York College and Wellspan Hospital. We have our PERTA, which that's only about $40,000. We have IDEA, which is a pass-through. It's federal money, but it passes through the IU, so it's considered local. And then we have in the other local revenue is where our medical, dental, and prescription are the collections that we get from retirees, plus what we put in there when we transfer over to the insurance account. Our state sources are just a little over $11 million. Our basic ed subsidy, we budgeted at the current number, which is $2.8 million. We do anticipate that number to go up, but the governor will only give his budget in February. Special ed, we're keeping that at just under $1.3 million. Again, all indications are for us, especially with our growth, that number will go up, but it's not near as significant as the basic ed number will go up. Transportation subsidy, we're estimating that to be a little over $600,000. Our rental reimbursement will maintain the same at about $365,000. Social Security reimbursement should be about $980,000. Retirement reimbursement will be $4.5. And then our other state sources is our health reimbursement, which that's gone down a little bit. That's at $64,000. Our Ready to Learn, that has remained the same for the last 6 years. It's at $171,000. We have a new one this year, which is our 1305 and 1306 students, which are basically foster students. That's $169,000, and we do feel that's going to continue to go up because our foster numbers continue to go up. We're currently at 30 students.
Is this the first year for that?
That's the first year we've gotten that big of it. Usually we've gotten maybe like a 10, 15,000, but this year it's significant, and we do feel that's going to continue to grow.
Do you care to hazard a guess on the basic ed subsidy increase with the ADMs up?
I don't, because there's three other main parts to the formula, but the one part that we know is the driver is as long as our ADMs go up, the other parts go up, so we know we'll get additional money. It's hard to say because last year, or the current year we're in, we got $80,000. The year before, we got $50,000, so it just depends how much money they're putting towards it, because they sort of add to the pot and then they redisperse everything. And then the last, under other state sources, we do have that school safety and security grant, which, if you remember, there's Part A, which is everyone gets. What they're doing for that year, though, is they're saying, depending on your enrollment, this is the amount of money you get, so we know we will get $40,000. And then there's Part B, which is a competitive piece. And then the federal resources, total $471,000. We get $69,000 in Title II, $26,000 in Title III, $28,000 in Title IV, and $346,000 in Title I. Title I, though, keeps going down, and it seems, someone made the comment, it looks like they're shifting from Title I and putting it in the other titles because they seem to go up. So ultimately, the dollars are about the same, but we still do see a somewhat of a decrease. Like, I think this year our decrease is about $20,000. So we held those numbers the same going into the 2021 budget. Then we do have other revenue sources. They're considered the 9,000s. We don't budget anything there because it's really something that happens after the fact, whether we decide to refinance, sale of fixed assets, or transfers from other funds. And that's something that usually just takes care of during the year. So if we look at the revenue comparison for the current year 1920 against the budget year of 2021, you'll see the percentages are almost the same when you look at the dollars. It's just the dollars are distributed differently. And we just took all of the pieces, the local, state, and federal, and put it into one pie so you could see how it really looks. And again, we're down $287,000 right now in revenue for 2021 compared to 1920.
Most of that's from state source.
Okay. Well, it appears in state from a percentage.
Not even the absolute number, you're down
Yeah.
200,000.
Right. But I'll get to some of the other reasons as to why it's local as well. So if you look at what's impacting the local sources, and this is real important for you to realize, on the local sources, there is no anticipated tax increase in here right now. It's based on what we know, current assessed value, and what that would bring in. So there's no tax increase in here, and there won't be a tax increase in here until probably March, when the board starts talking about where they want to settle in and what will that look like. So the local real estate assessed value is actually an increase of $7.5 million higher from last year. In the grand scheme of things, though, while it looks like a huge number, when you take that against a mill and then on a collected mill, it nets $7,287 per mill. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And again, the collection rate is 97%. Current year, that's what we're starting the 2021 year out with as well. Our interim real estate taxes, we budgeted $85,000 higher than we have in the past. They are going up. In talking with both tax collectors, they see that trend continuing as well, which is why we have the realty transfer tax up as well, because of the sales. As you know, the shopping centers seem to be a thing that constantly plays with us, so we're erring on that side. Interest earnings are down, the $92,000, and insurance is down, which was that local piece. Again, it doesn't reflect in the number because the taxes went up, but the local share has gone down to $1.3 million, and that is actually where most of that $282,000 comes from. Okay. The state sources impacting the revenue, again, basic ed, we're going to keep it where it is. Special ed, we're going to keep it where it is to start this year out. And retirement reimbursement, while it is an increase, it's a very small increase compared to what we had between years 2011-12 and 2017-18. Most of those years you saw anywhere between a 3 and a 4.5% increase. And then on the next page just shows you the PSERS projected rates over the next 4 years. It's a total of 5 years, but 4 years where it is. They will meet sometime this month and actually determine if they're going to leave that rate at 34.77 or if they're going to adjust it up or down. So this graph will change somewhat, but it won't be until the January board that you'll see anything. So then we go on to expenditures. And again, years 2012 to 2013 to 2018-19, those are audited final numbers. Then the budget and the projected number, and this again is a snapshot in time, so those numbers will change as well. If we look at the expenditure comparison by major function, This is looking at the current year versus the budget year. It's up 3.2 million, which is a 4.8% increase over 1920. The other financing, which is the 5,000s, that is down 1.3 million because of the LBT transfer. Again, LBT played on the revenue side, it plays on the expense side. We did that, so essentially it's a wash, but it does take that number change, which is why the significant change in the percentage. It's not because we lost a lot of debt, it's because of the line item for the LBT. Non-instructional services are the 3,000s, so that would be our student activities and our athletics. The instructional services are the 1,000, so that's regular ed, special ed, and our vocational. And then the support services are pupil personnel, health services, admin services, operations and maintenance, and our transportation. If we look at the next page, that's the, what's the matter?
The graphs aren't showing up on the display.
No, they were earlier. I'm not either, because they,
I can get to that, but
yeah,
the two graphs prior to that.
that's odd. I'm sorry, they were, because you saw me run the test. For those in the audience, this will be posted tomorrow, and you'll be able to look at the graphs. So if you look at the expenditures by object, go back. It'd be slide 17. Isn't that weird? They disappeared. All right. So if we look at the impact by expenditures in 2021 by object, the 100 is salaries. That's up from 1920 by 957,000. And I will explain that number as we go through. The 300 is professional services. That's where we would find the IU, which is $1,039,000. Also in there are our IU services are 2.8 million. Our other professional services are just a little over $1 million. That would include our legal, our tax collectors, our subs, because we pay subs as a contract now, we don't pay them as salaries, our audit, and our financial and our HR software. Our property services are our water, our sewer, our waste, repairs and maintenance, and our copier lease. Under our 500s, our transportation, which is just under 2.3 million. Our tuition is 154,000 for other LEAs. Our charter and cyber is at 2.1, and our VOTEC is just under $1 million. For our benefits, that's Social Security, which is 1.9. Our retirement is just over 9 million. Our insurance is for our medical, which is 8.3, and our dental is at 664,000, which puts us up in total 2.3 million, which is actually in that area just under a 12.5% increase. In our supplies, or 600, which is supplies, our true supplies, which is 610, is just over 800,000. Our natural gas is in there, our electric is in there, and our tech supplies are in there. Our books are in there also at 412,000, which is a 43% increase. So that's one of those numbers we will be paying attention to as we work through the process. Our 700 for property and equipment, That tech hardware is in there at $184,000. We have capitalized equipment at $96,000, and we have our tech replaceable equipment at $65,000 in there as well. Then our 800 object is interest on bonds, which is 1.4, and our budgetary reserve, which is 200,000. In our 900 object, we have transfers and other financing. That has our debt service principal of 4.2. It also has $282,000 in there, which is part of goal 2, which I'll get to shortly as I go through the goals, and a capital reserve transfer in there of $500,000. And all of this you'll see when you get your worksheets that have all the line by objects and everything. This is just an overview so you know the starting point that administration is working with. So if we looked at what's impacting the expenditures, it's new staff, it's medical benefits, it's facilities, repairs and maintenance, it's transportation, books, our tech hardware and equipment, and our tuition, not only just to cyber charters, but also to other LEAs in the VOTEC. And the VOTEC's up because we have more students attending, so that's a good thing, but it's just that it's up. As presented by Dr. Williams at the November 18th meeting, these are the broad budget goals that the administration used to build this budget. So it's funding new positions to align with class size guidelines, prepare for anticipated facility needs to house the growing population, fund required positions, evaluate/consider requested positions, contain operational costs, and remain within an index of 3.1, and that was established by the board approving the opt-out resolution. So if we look at funding the budget, expenditures for board consideration is goal 1, which is fund new positions to align with the class size guidelines. So if we add with what Dr. Williams presented, we would need an additional 3 teachers to reduce class size at a cost of $336,600. 2 of them would be at the elementary. We actually would need 4, but 2 are already addressed in goal 4 as requested positions. There would be none for the middle school and 1 for high school business ed, as there's already ask in there for 3.5. Goal 2, prepare for anticipated facility needs. There's an additional dollars to help cover debt service for borrowing for facilities renovation at 0.16 of a mil, and that was obtained from the presentation that Mr. Phillips did, and that was expressed as a possible place to start, so that was put in here for consideration. There's also a total... That was when I looked at his study, if you remember, he presented 5 scenarios, and that was a number that was brought out, and that was actually kind of middle of the road, because if you remember, there was a 0.1, there was a 0.16, and there was a 0.25. So I went with the middle of the road. For personnel, there's actually 15 new positions in this budget for consideration, totaling $1.1 million. Goal 3, fund required positions. Again, I'm going into those 15 personnel things now. Goal 3 is required positions. This is the autism class that is next in the rollout. We're now ready to have one at middle school. So that requires a teacher, 2 paras, and a PCA to keep that class going. So they fall under Goal 3. Then the rest of the personnel falls under Goal 4, which is a psych intern, an elementary teacher, a kindergarten teacher, behavioral specialist, family and student services, high school FACS at a 0.5, high school applied technology, high school social sciences, a floating HRA, an EL para, and an interventionist para. At this time, we know of no retirements, so we can't put in that there are any swaps. Usually, by the time I do this, we know there's at least 1 or 2. At the moment, we don't, but we will keep you abreast of them as we get them, because it will alter that $1.1 million for new staff. So on the next page, if we look at the revenue together and the expenditures together, we now see that we have a gap of 4.5, almost $4.6 million. What makes that up is adding the 1.1 million in personnel. We have a 3.2 increase in the expenses that I reviewed with you earlier. And I also showed you there was a 281,000 drop in our revenue. So that's what makes up that $4.5 million gap. Now again, this is a snapshot in time. We will work to reduce this. In almost all cases, this first presentation, this is the worst case scenario. So I guess that's the good news. And again, just another way to show you audited numbers, revenue to expenditure comparison, what that looked like at year end, what our budget year looks like, and what our projection looks like. So goal 5 is to contain operational costs, and as always, during the current year and as we work through the budget, administration will always review supplies, but we also will take a harder look at charter cyber school tuition, and two of the ways we've talked about doing this and need some more exploration is high school using more of York Adams Academy. There's also been some talk and need to investigate our own cyber hybrid program. Continue to look at staffing. And as I mentioned earlier, the book cost is up considerably, so we have to delve into that a little more to see what makes that up. Could be it's fully legit. Just have to look at everything in a little more detail, which will be done as the administration reviews each of their budgets with the cabinet, which that'll start the beginning of January. Goal 6 is remain within the index. Administrative recommendation at this time would be increase revenue up to the index, which would be just under a 1.3 million, or a little over 70% of a mil. And use of assigned retirement fund balance. The reason that's there is, if you will recall, for this year's budget, we pulled $300,000 to use, and the talk with that was once we started using it, we would continue to use it. So that's why that's in there right now as well. Options for consideration by the board would be a total tax increase for the 3.1. Use of unassigned fund balance, which we know from the audit, that sits at 4.9. The use of assigned insurance claim revenue, that's at a 1.7. Use of capital reserve fund transfer, the current balance in there is 1.9 million, and that's out there because that is something we did do for this current year budget on some of the capital expenditures that we knew were one time. We did move over to there. And of course, you can always do any combination of the above. And I would just put out there as a reminder that for the current year's budget, the board opted to use 1.1 million of fund balance to balance the budget. So the next couple slides are just millage history for your recall, and county millage comparison, and then a county millage history comparison. Just gives you a really good idea of where the district has been and where we currently are. So the next steps required of administration is to control spending, which is what we always look at current year as we're working on the budget. Where do we give and take? Reevaluate staffing as it comes forward. Identify potential savings both for the remainder of this year, even as we look into the budget for 2021. And then present recommendations to the board. Again, that would be through Finance Committee whether it's by itself or combined. In this case, it'll be combined. Or you may call a separate one. There will be planning, there'll be board meetings. So there will be plenty of avenue to discuss this. And that concludes the presentation. Any questions?
I'd like to make a request.
Yes?
That's it on page 23,
Yes?
where you see the revenue to expenditure comparison. Could you also provide for the years 2013, 14 through 2018, 19, what the budgeted revenues and expenses were for those years?
Yes. On that same type of graph, or do you want, okay.
Same type of graph is fine. Or you could put it all on a table if that would help. It doesn't have to be graphed.
It's easier to do it that way.
All right.
Because in that way, those that like visual can see the visual, those that prefer numbers can see the numbers.
What if you like both?
Then you've got them both.
There you go.
To refresh our memory regarding fund balance, we had our hands slapped a few years ago because our fund balance got so low.
Correct.
What is, I'll use the word optimum,
By board policy, 5%.
5%,
Correct.
which would be dollars.
It's, the percentage is always based off the so in this case, for working 2021, it would be 5% off of the budgeted expenditure, or the projected expenditures. What's that? The 68, correct.
The final audit figures for last year came in at 8%.
Right. But you always deal with the percentage in the year that you're working in. Because when PDE looks at it, that's what they look at, is what you're submitting. So it would be the current year expenditure. Anything else? Thank you. Now on to my second information item. At the October Finance meeting, there was discussion on returning the $330,000 that the board had opted not to use for the SPO. And during that meeting, it was asked if because I was going to put both amend the budget for the money that we were keeping, and then also an item to return the money so that it had board approval. And it was raised to talk with the state and make sure that we were following the process correctly, and if there was anything in addition we needed to do. Item 2 is based on that phone call. We were back and forth with a contact, and she talked to several of her colleagues, and they all decided it needed to go back to the School Safety and Security Committee. So the committee has come back, and they would like the board to reconsider the vote on the original competitive application regarding school resource officer / school police officer hires. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Williams.
The administration has no recommendations to do at this point. You clearly understand we're not asking you to reconsider this.
So if we reconsider, or if we do not reconsider, start there. We pass this, we're done. We give back the money for the SBOs, but we also give back the money in the infrastructure. It's all or nothing, correct?
No, we still get to keep that $80,000 for technology. This is purely the $330,000+ for the SPO piece that was written for the grant.
So, what's the incentive to reconsider?
They think we're crazy.
They weren't prepared for this kind of...
In their words, they never had this happen before. That's what started the entire conversation. So that's why it was And she was very diligent. She'd talk to somebody, she'd get back to us, then they'd say, it needs to go up to the next. So they took it to the top, their top, and then that's when it was decided it needed to go back to the committee.
If we give it back, what's the likelihood of getting the next one?
I can't answer that, because they did not, that was not part of the answer.
Did anybody ask why we were refusing money? Or did they just like go, what?
Yes,
That was it?
that was,
But nobody asked why?
I have to go back on my trail. I don't think they did they?
I think I provided some explanation in the email that I sent to them.
I mean, going all the way to the top of the food chain, or where, you know, whatever departmental structure it was in Harrisburg, nobody thought to ask why a district would turn down that amount of funding. Nobody.
I think, like I said, their first reaction was, what? We've never had this happen, and they were more about how did they do it?
Okay.
But as Dr. Ketterman said, as they asked us to put it in email, we provided more information.
I mean, when we provided more information, what was the nature of that additional information?
Why were we returning it based on the board not approving it?
Okay.
That's what it was.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but they came back and asked us, could you provide further detail? Am I correct, Dr. Ketterman?
They wanted us to provide, they suggested we provide something that we would do with the money in the categories that we originally applied for. And so, and in that, I provided an explanation, just to give a background of, the board did not approve this. We're looking for what we need to, what we can do with the money. And so then we provided another proposal, but we did not go down the personnel route. And then in this email that they sent back after the committee discussed it, they basically were denying
The reconsideration.
or this other, attempt we made to get some more infrastructure technology type stuff, and said instead you need to go back and ask the board to reconsider your original plea.
So it's their way or nothing, basically.
Right now, yes.
Okay.
So is there a motion to reconsider their decision?
I'll take that motion. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to reconsider their decision. Give the money back. Let's get through this before we decide whether or not we're going to do anything with the money. So, discussion on the motion to keep the money.
John, the rationale and the discussions, which were long, arduous, detailed, and convincing, I think, haven't changed. The most important of which is use of grant money for establishing personnel slots for which there's no guarantee of continued support. And it's significant.
Pilots for personnel.
I think the reality is that you start down the road of pilot, and it always takes off. It always gets the whole crew hired. It's not just a pilot, and that would be our fear.
I don't know that I agree with that.
It's a huge risk to think that we could absorb $300,000 over a 2-year period on an ongoing basis without grant support. That's reason number one. Second, we still have what I believe are 2 highly competent professional police forces that serve our districts. The same taxpayers already pay for those kinds of services. And I'm absolutely convinced that that's sufficient. Third, all these are equal in my mind, is that there's never been a threat assessment that established the need for any of these services. This is the state telling us that we need to do something because they're unwilling to actually do the hard work and specify specific remedies to specific problems.
Well, we applied for the money, it just didn't fall out of the sky.
You know, Sam, it did fall out of the sky. It moved from one aspect of the state budget to the other. It was a bait and switch. I mean, I really don't want to get emotional about this, but the state has pulled these tricks for years with school boards.
We applied for it, we have two
And
administrators who spend a lot of their
we, the
professional time applying for that grant.
And we, the school board, when it came to the establishment of the utilization of a large block of money for personnel, said, we don't think that's an appropriate use. We didn't have the opportunity to say that before the grant application was put in. And I think that's important. It's not to say that we need to make every decision. That's not our job, but this is an important piece of staffing in the district that has potentially million-dollar implications every year.
It also has the potential of protecting students in harm's way. I don't think we need to lose sight of that.
I'm absolutely aware of that. I'm totally aware of
I
that.
think it needs to be said and seriously considered that this is a very real consideration, and that if we say, oh, there's no threat.
That isn't what I said. I
Well-
said we haven't done a threat assessment. It's cart before the horse.
Well, I think we can just, I disagree with you, Joel, and that's my right,
That's
and
healthy.
you're certainly, okay, but I don't think these statements can be made out of whole cloth and considered fact.
Well, I would suggest that you take a look at some of the research that talks to the actual value of police officers or resource officers on the ground in school districts and what we're getting for what we think we're getting. What's the value that's actually created? And is there another way to do that? Most of the longitudinal studies talk about the value of the personnel, what should I say, the soft side of it. It's not so much the security as it is the feel-good piece of it, which frankly gets into the area of social work and some of the other SEL supports
Which
that
frankly,
we all agree with.
perception is reality in many cases.
Is the best way to handle that a full-time uniformed police officer? And if it is, does that one in a district as widespread as ours with the footprint that we have, is that served well by one person or two people, or are we on this not so slippery slope toward a full-blown police department, which we have two of right now serving the district? Those are my concerns. And I think we made the right decision when we voted not to take the money for that purpose.
Other thoughts and comments?
I'd like to understand what we're doing right now. Are we planning to take a vote?
We are going to vote first on whether or not, yes or no, we're standing by our decision to give the money back, or no, we are rethinking the proposal. If we get through that, if we say we're standing by a decision, we're done. If we're gonna rethink this, then we've got another food fight coming about what we do with the money.
It's a do-over.
Right,
We wipe out the last vote and we go again.
right. But we've gotta get past that before we do anything with the money.
Clarify the motion.
The motion on the table is, do we accept their recommendation and reconsider our vote to give the money back? So we have a motion on the table to keep the money and not return.
No, that's not what we have.
That's
We have a
not what we
motion to reconsider, as if we had never had the prior discussion.
Okay, that's fair, we can do it that way.
Sure, so then on that matter, I see that as a process issue. I think we were as transparent as we could be, spent many months debating this, and came to a conclusion and we took a vote. So I do not see a reason to reopen it. I mean, I don't see a reason that the state is providing, I don't see any reasons on the table. So, given the long process by which we rationally deliberated about this, I don't see why we should be responsive to this request.
We have members that weren't here for this discussion. We have thoughts from.
Well, my understanding, again, thank you, not having been present for the original discussion, was that there was a funding question and there was sort of a logically posterior set of questions about the suitability of either an armed social worker or an unarmed security officer. So I think it goes even beyond the question of the money, whether the board could come to any agreement as to how they saw the positions being filled and the role of the individual or individuals. And I could be perfectly bloodless about taking money from the state for 2 years and then pulling the plug on the program. I mean, the feds do that to me all the time. So, I understand that once people are on site and walking around, and it's not a position anymore, it's a name, it's a person, they fit into a team, that it becomes harder to get rid of those folks. But I think as we go in with everybody having the understanding that it's a pilot, I have no problem with taking the money for 2 years, for however long it runs, and then pulling the plug on that. But I was not present for the discussions about, again, whether the model of an armed social worker or an unarmed, well, okay. But I guess the question is, it raises, again, I don't think you guys want to kick that anthill over again necessarily and have to have all those discussions again necessarily, because I have all sorts of questions about liability and things of that nature. I mean, I don't know whether did we have counsel or anyone else do an assessment of whether of what the net liability for bringing an armed staff member or multiple armed staff members into school buildings would be? Did we do that assessment? I'm sorry that I don't know the answer to these questions, but I wasn't here for those discussions, and I don't know the answers to those questions. So,
and there were 2 tiers. There was us bringing our officer, us contracting with districts. There was the SRO versus the SPO. So there was a sort of a pyramid of opportunities in different ways. So,
and were there job descriptions proposed?
There were.
And with respect to the competitive grant application that got us to this point, was there anything in the way the application was scored that could informally be prejudicial to future applications, such as describe your performance with other PCCD grants? And if we don't have a basis for answering the question on future grant applications, we can't get the points for doing that.
Yeah, well, last year, I mean, this current year is the first time there was such a grant, but there is nothing in the application that has.
So if they allowed us, say there's a grant 2 years from now, and we can spend it 90% on technology if you want to, but we might want to go after a grant in that case, and there wouldn't, I suspect, be the degree of disagreement about that there would be about the staffing and having people on and the roles and everything else that came along with the personnel funding on this one.
We submitted one for this coming year. We have one in the works already, and yes, we avoided the personnel altogether.
And there wasn't anything formal in their communication that would suggest that if you guys really knew what was good for you, you would.
They again, I think that's why they came back with, we would like you to ask your board to reconsider. And they need an answer by December 31st, which is why it's on this agenda.
So the motion on the table is actually to whether we would reconsider, whether it would be yea or nay.
That's
So
motion one.
do we want to open up the discussion again?
correct.
I guess a yes vote would be to open up the discussion, and no vote would be to deny it.
Correct. Is it a vote? Roll call, please.
Schrader?
Yes.
Sullivan?
No.
Sanders?
No.
Fryrick?
No.
Toman? Posnell?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Scolette?
No.
Sears?
No, you do that.
Okay.
That makes the rest of the discussion very easy.
Business report's done.
Ms. Dyer, thanks for your patience.
I would like to start off by congratulating our golf and field hockey teams for being selected for the YAIAA Division II Sportsmanship Award. Also, 7 students from the high school recently visited Penn State York for the York Young Women's Symposium presented by Junior Achievement of South Central PA. Thank you to the students and staff for an amazing experience, and special thanks to Vera Cornish, a renowned speaker and author of Dare to Dream, for sharing her expertise. The high school student council will be working on registering students who will be 18 to vote on or before the Pennsylvania primary election on April 28th. This initiative is from the Pennsylvania Department of State, and the plan is to proceed this in January. No Shave November was very successful. We passed our goal of $5,000 by ending the month with a grand total of $7,804.67, which is a significant difference from last year's total of $2,500. Mini-Son will also be hosting a glow-in-the-dark Diamond Disco Winter Rave on January 11th from 7:30 to 9 in the high school gym, with all proceeds going to the 4 Diamonds Foundation. On Tuesday, December 17th, from 5 to 7 p.m., the Link Crew will be hosting their annual Cookies, Cocoa, and Cram event. This event takes place in the library and gives freshmen 2 structured hours to review concepts for their midterms and from their 4 core classes. The freshmen will have the opportunity to work with peer tutors and teachers, and opens the door to show them how much preparation goes into studying for midterms. The holiday concert is coming up on Sunday, December 15th at 2 p.m. in the high school auditorium. And the high school string ensemble will be going to the Rotary to perform some holiday tunes on Wednesday, December 18th for their meeting. The Students Against Destructive Decisions organization has asked several elementary schools to share with them information on any students who have been impacted by addiction in their family in the past year. The organization is going to purchase some special gifts to share with them and show their support for them as they struggle with this difficult time. And finally, boys basketball kicked off their season with a scrimmage against Illinois Catholic on Saturday the 30th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Cookies, cocoa, and cram. I love it.
You have the committee meeting schedule posted online here. Academic standards and curriculum committee report.
Yes, the Academic Standards and Curriculum Committee discussed the administration's new and modified high school course proposal at its meeting November 13th. And the committee recommended a discussion of the proposal with anticipated action taking place at our next regular meeting on December 16th. We are thrilled to have Dr. Ellis with us to guide this discussion.
Given that 8 of the 9 of you were at that meeting, I don't want to necessarily rehash all the pieces, but I'm happy to answer any questions that might have surfaced since our conversation about any of the course offerings that we're proposing. Yes.
Under the proposed principles of leadership involving the Link Crew.
Yes.
Are they eligible to take this 1 year, 2 years?
In that it is effectively the same course in 2 consecutive years, they would only be able to earn a credit one time, but there would be no reason they couldn't audit the course or do that in lieu of a study hall the second year. But it's our standard practice not to do a course more than once.
I had a related question just in the news. I think this week I heard about a personal finance course that the governor is talking about requiring, or that did pass. I don't know the exact status.
Correct. The language, my understanding, I'm not sure if it passed or not, is that could be counted as a mathematics, family consumer science, and or science credit, I believe, business class, in lieu of the pieces. So theoretically, it could fit into the math, the 3 credits for graduation for math.
So this course would count in that regard, the one that you...
With the structure that the state has put forth. I would like to get a little more guidance on that, because I'd hate to see a student only take 2.5 years of math and then take this course as the 3rd course, so I'd like to get some clarification on that. But theoretically, it could count.
Right.
The governor signed it, it did pass.
Oh, it did pass?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just rung a bell with me since we just talked about it and that was in the news.
And Ms. Mason just checked, it did pass, so we will need to respond to it at some point. Although honestly, now that I say that, the way we have defined graduation requirements is it's 7 STEM credits, so we would still have a little bit of a buffer there to require the 3 math, the 3 science, and then that could count in lieu of that, so. But it will encourage students to take it, which is the whole goal of the structure of having it in the first place.
See, the zealot in me could argue that while it's a valuable thing, it is not math, it's arithmetic. So.
You don't have to sell the math teacher on that piece.
Studies, put wherever
Yes.
you want, this is not math.
I would agree 100% as a math teacher and as a principal, but
Help me understand the difference between arithmetic and math.
3 plus 3 is not math.
I don't know.
The definition of the derivative is.
Computer doesn't say arithmetic, it says we have math. Everything, they start out with math. Guess what is math?
When I was 3, it hurt.
When you do your finances, you're not gonna actually do any math. It's just you're gonna put it in like quicken over. Yeah, don't understand the
Add and
finance.
subtract.
Right.
No math at all.
So where you put it makes a difference.
and that's where, to recap, we actually will have it in both places. We'll have a business-based offering, which will be at higher level, as Mr. Tobin alluded to, just how you put it into QuickBooks and understand that element of it. We do have a mathematics-based financial literacy course, which will get into the mathematics of how an amortization table works, how a budget works, how do taxes and progressive taxes versus flat taxes and so forth, how do they work. So we have both offerings, and we'll try to cater to the students as they come in.
Anything else for Dr. Ellis regarding the new and modified course proposals? So we'll vote on these in December, so. And our next, discussion point was, the administration class rank proposal. We talked about that on the 13th. And they're also asking that we, vote on that, give them, yes or no on the 16th. So that's maybe a little more, topic for discussion, and you want to refresh our memory?
Sure. In the proposal, it is my belief, as well as the teaching faculty's belief, that it's appropriate at this point to move away from class rank, to use, as Heidi H. Jacobs referred to it. We believe it's an antiquated form that's no longer appropriate for our students. I took the feedback that I got over the course of the 3 meetings and tried to reorganize the research that I had done and others had done into it, into more of the frequently asked questions, as well as to specifically address some of the questions that you had posed at the last meeting. So I laid those pieces out into the various questions, but it's to organize the research behind it. We are one of the few schools in Pennsylvania we consider top schools to still have class rank. Most schools have abandoned it. Largely their theory behind doing it is that the class rank actually hurts students in terms of college admissions, because our top 10% student may be far better than someone else's top 5% student, but because of being where they are, they have an adverse impact. I went back and looked at our college admissions stats in terms of how it compares to national admission rates, and our students actually trail those rates. I was still surprised. I expected to be similar, a little bit higher. I was very surprised to see that we actually trail those national rates, and I personally have to think that is a factor, although there certainly could be other factors. And there are some other pieces that were in that description. I won't go through and reread the whole FAQ to you, because you had time prior to this meeting as well as before the next meeting to do that, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about our proposal.
I can't grappling with this one. Okay. I'm glad to see that you're considering phasing it in, so that, because I was trying to think about if you started with the incoming class next year, do you know what I'm saying, then they would go full blast of the new way of doing it.
As it is written right now, this would go into effect for our current freshmen, because they do not know what their class rank is or have not been exposed to it yet. However, that certainly would be a simple modification, if that's the direction the board would wish to go, to put it on our 8th graders. That would just be a different year that we would type in.
And now, given that everything I'm gathering is, or almost everything is electronically transmitted for the college applications, am I correct? It's been a long time since I've had to deal with that.
99% are electronic submissions, yes.
Okay. There, in one of the links that you gave, it's called Class Rank and College Admission. I picked up on this as an interesting whether or not your school district promotes the class ranking system, you and your colleagues can find a way to make colleges aware of your students' achievements and future potential. You could do this by, and they give a list of basically students' GPA activities they're involved in, range and media of GPAs, the range and median of SAT scores. I'm not going to read it all, too. It's one of the ones that you gave to us. do we have a document or some sort of a thing that we could send to the colleges so that they would understand who or what York Suburban is?
Yes, it's a little bit different purpose than what you have there. It addresses a lot of it. It's called our class profile. It's available on the high school website. It's a 2-page document. It includes basic demographic information about our area. It describes our grading system, because as I shared with you 4 or 5 years ago, our grading system is so different than anyone else's in terms of how we do things. So it explains how that is done so they can translate our transcript so they know what a 3.7 on the transcript means as opposed to an A-. It has background on terms of how our students perform on the SAT compared to national averages, our AP results, our national merit results. It has a flow chart showing that the top, I forget how exactly, it's like anyone with a 3.8 or higher, what their average SAT is, a 3.6 to 3.8, what their average SAT is, which gives a little bit of benchmark of how our best students do on the national exams. There's a comparison, and it also, we have a list of all the students that are, or all the college our students have attended over the last 3 graduating classes.
Okay, well, that did
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing, so because students might be able to get some of this in their, some of the essays that they have to write. Sometimes those essays are very specific. They tell you what you have to write about, so you don't have room to talk about this kind of information. So as long as that's being sent either electronically or however else it's.
Sure. Yeah, that goes along with every application. And then now the standard student applications generally ask students to write down all of that themselves. So they're sending a resume along. When we work in class, we actually have the students develop a resume that they can attach to their applications, or in some cases, the application requires them to enter that information again. And then it's our standard practice. I mean, I write a handful of recommendation letters. Certainly our senior and junior teachers write a ton of them. But they always, the students are to share their resume with the teachers so that then we can target those biggest and most appropriate things in regards to the unique things that the students are doing, whether it's the Impact Foundation or whether they started their own nonprofit business or whatever it might be, to really highlight those
But I think
pieces.
this is more about, not just about the student, but to show the quality of the program that York Suburban offers.
Yep.
And I think that's critical, probably, if we're not showing class rank.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Yes.
So one question. So the 2020, no change basically to current policy.
Correct. Our seniors would go as usual.
2021, 22, it's optional, which means we have the numbers from everyone. We're just not putting them on your, we're not giving them to you unless you ask, but we've calculated.
Correct. We would not put them on the transcript unless specifically requested by the student or the family.
And the reason you would do away with it being optional in 2023 is that you don't want people requesting it that won't happen.
Philosophically,
Because you're not going to do the calculation.
correct. Philosophically, I believe if it's there in any presence, it's still going to have an undercurrent that students are going to be driven by, and I don't think I want them to be driven by. With that said, the idea of it being optional is a practice that a number of students have, or another school districts have adopted, that only on a specific request from a college or university because they really want it, would they share that information. But through the course of those 43 school districts, about half of them do have a practice where it is held in reserve, and then a college may request it directly if they think it will be beneficial, and the school will share it under those standpoints alone. But it's not shared with the family. It's shared directly to the college or university that requests it, or scholarship organization.
So how is that not right to know information?
I'm not sure whether they have a different interpretation than Stock and Leader necessarily would have in regards to that particular piece. And or it has been, because so many of those schools took this move 20 years ago, class rank's no longer part of the culture that people are even pursuing it, or concerned or interested in it.
No, they just don't do it.
Potentially. Yeah. And most of those policies are specifically written that it will not be shared. So I'm not sure whether or how the lawyers would argue you're right as the board to set a policy where that cannot be shared versus a right-to-know request, whether it actually is something that needs to be. That, I need to leave
Well,
to
I'm
me.
concerned about the term, the right to know, I think it's the purpose. What we really talking about the purpose.
Ah, yes.
Right to know request is good, which is possible. So it's being a purpose, that's really what you're.
Okay.
Anything else?
Have you had much reaction to the last time we spoke about this, and there was another at the committee meeting who was very passionate, wanted to class ranked and getting.
I have not heard any additional feedback, save for one parent approached me following the academic standards meeting. She was present in the audience and said she was fully in support of it. She had two daughters that graduated from here, very different paths or different ideas. The first one very driven and to the point of concern over class rank, whereas the other one was basically was told not to care. Basically, they took an approach as a family to not to focus that way, and in the end, they both ended up very similarly in the end, and both happy and so forth. That basically the point being, it was two completely different paths to the same point and the same destination in the end, but that she was very much in favor of not having the burden of class rank there. In terms of the whole audience of who I've spoken to, there was only one person, I believe most of you received the message, there was one gentleman from the community that was adamantly against ending class rank. Everyone else was at least neutral on it and or in favor of eliminating it. The major concerns I heard were from students or from parents of students that are currently very high in their classes, concerned that that was going to go away because they believed their children had worked very hard for that ranking and deserved to be able to keep it and not having it taken out from underneath them right now. But most of those parents were also at least understanding of the idea of not starting it again with our freshmen. They were accepting of the rationale for it. But in the grand scheme of things, we're talking less than a dozen people raised comments to this, and all the parents received it through the emails that I sent out.
So to clarify, the proposal that we'll vote on at our next meeting eliminates it beginning with this year's freshmen because they don't know.
Correct. This year's freshmen will not have a class rank, or will never be calculated, save for the valedictorian, salutatorian at the very end of their careers, and that the sophomores and juniors would have the option to simply maintain their rank in terms of being on their transcript or not to have it included any longer.
What do you think, Chrissy? Personally, what you've heard, that's why you're here.
I would say, like, class rank does hurt more than it does help from what I've seen, just because it's, like, what kids really focus on. Personally, it's not what I focus on, but, I mean, I don't see it necessarily helping. But, I mean, for some kids it does, like, some kids it does, but I guess it's all relative, but from what I've seen, I don't think so.
That's why you're here. Use your expertise. Thank you.
Well, just one thing I'd like to say is that as we go forward, if it's adopted, I would suggest that somehow, because some of these things are really fairly serious statements. For example, the idea that it actually hurts. You said that earlier, that could have an adverse impact on acceptance into elite schools, and that's interesting. Those things can be measured. So if this is done, do we have some kind of baseline that you can use progressively to evaluate this decision? In other words, there are things like anxiety levels and other sorts of things that are being stated here to rationalize this move, besides the fact that it's antiquated, or the statement that it's antiquated. So how do we actually measure that we've achieved the objectives if we eliminate class rank?
Well, I have tracked our college admissions rates since I came here. Officially, it's now in the Navient system from the class of 2014 on. We have the complete records of the student applications. Now, it is still the student reporting it, so it's not 100% accurate, and every now and then the students don't bother to go in and say whether they were accepted or denied. They just put an application out there. But we certainly can track that, so we'll be able to say what our acceptance rates were in 2014 or over a period, because our elite school applications are still relatively small. There may be 2 students that will apply to a given Ivy League school, but over a period of 5 years or so forth, we would have a smaller sample that we could see whether or not those trends have improved, or over a group of schools, maybe the top 10 students, or top 10 schools, top 20 schools, and so forth. So we certainly can track the admissions rates to see if we have improvement there. So that's the piece. The social emotional piece in terms of the anxiety and so forth, that's promoted. Certainly there'll be all kinds of social emotional surveys that we'll be doing just as part of our programs from the middle school program on up, that will be able to track it. That one might be a little bit trickier because the students now could certainly speak to how class rank has impacted them, whereas a sophomore, or the freshman, or the 8th graders or 7th graders who are in high school, they won't necessarily know what class rank is, but we could try to measure some of that. The same kind of questions that I asked the current seniors as well as the most recent graduates in a little bit different format, to ask the same kind of questions in terms of how academic stresses are creating anxiety in them. And they I'll use the term class ranked with the newer students because they don't know what it is, but there would be something similar that I could ask.
Now, you're a math guy, so you could probably construct a model or something, some analysis that would also take into account course selection. Because one of the other statements you make in the rationale is that a lot of kids are taking courses because of the weighting, and that's because of impact on class rank, and they might make other decisions if that pressure were lifted.
Correct.
Am I saying that properly?
Yeah, no,
Can you measure that?
we could certainly measure that.
Would you be willing to say after a specified period of time, long enough, because there are also people who are arguing in favor of keeping class rank, that if we don't get these effects that we're looking for, that we would reinstate it? Let's say 5 years from now, we would go back and reinstate class rank and phase it back in?
Certainly. I mean, that would, like anything else, I always want to measure and make sure that we're making good decisions on behalf of the students. And if we're not having the progress or the success that we want to have, we need to continue to redirect and so forth.
It makes real things like data-driven decisions and the critical thinking that we're trying to teach the kids, and this gives us an opportunity to put it in practice.
No, I certainly could come up with some benchmarks to measure where we are and the progress we've made. At the same time, also, as being a bit of a researcher as well, I certainly hope there's other things that we do as a high school faculty over the next 4 or 5 years to improve our college admissions rates for other purposes, the curriculum initiative, the HQTL.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts here.
So definitively to say it is only
a lot
about
of moving
class
parts.
rank, but also my experience, and I hopefully could
Right.
construct that to be able to narrowly be able to define the impact that that has. Takes me back to my dissertation days a little bit. So, sure, we'll definitely do that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Posnow. You have before you the personnel report, which includes employment, resignation, and extracurricular. For any board member, like any member, any of these items considered separately, or there any questions on any of these items, including the addendum agenda under employment that includes items D, E, and F. If not, the chair moves approval of the below-mentioned items.
Second.
Questions?
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Sure. Legislative update. Let me begin with an apology. I know last time I informed all of you that I would be going to the Springettsbury Township Planning Commission. Upon reading the agenda, I revised that decision and did not attend because it was just too action-packed and I didn't think my nervous system could stand it. In other action, the hot action up in Harrisburg, installing of HR 1800, a voucher bill for the city of Harrisburg. That measure may resurface over the next several weeks. PSBA is asking us to be vigilant in casting our voices against this bill. In addition, March 23rd, 2020 will be Advocacy Day. I know you're all rushing now to put that date on your calendars. It's a fun-filled day in Harrisburg. And on the basis of the budget presentation, it appears that Dr. Williams and my colleagues on the board are probably well advised to start making the rounds with our local elected representatives and advocating for stronger support of public education. On that note, I will entertain any questions. Hearing none, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Nothing for you to go into earlier light with the highlights from the Carolina board meeting of November 26th. Always interesting, keep you abreast of what's going on operating authority, I have actually no report since we're only doing it quarterly. We are actually meeting tomorrow to reorganize, for the coming year. With Veterans Academy, we have, I'm pleased to report, still have 15 of our 15 seats filled, and that for graduation, next week on December 10th at 7 p.m., which we all invited to attend over at the Learning Center, we have the 3 York Suburban people who will be graduating, and Abigail Baker, Alexis Miller, and Braden Raber. I asked that those be put into the minutes. Mrs. Irwin, I did the that concludes the report.
Could I ask a question, Ellen?
Sure.
When they graduate, what's on their diploma?
It's the school district, York Suburban School
So
District.
they
It is a dual enrollment kind of thing, whereas when we used to be York County High School, we were our own entity. Now it's dual enrollment, and at least 3 graduates will go towards the calculating the percentage of graduates from York Suburban in the spring, which is really good. I think Dr. Ellis has been very vigilant about putting these things on our program each year for the last year.
No report.
While I'm thinking about it right here, I'd like to mention that tonight is Mrs. Mason's last night with us. And I would like to personally thank her for all of her hard work. I think we saw it again with budget, with audit findings. So we will miss you, and all the best. No audit findings, so we will miss you, and all the best in the future endeavors.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kareem.
I've enjoyed it.
I love it when a finding that starts with no is high praise.
Yes, we approved the budget, which each district, just for those of you as a reminder, each district is asked to vote on the budget by, I think it's February. We have traditionally, at York Suburban, voted on it in January, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It does reflect a 2.54 increase, and that's actually, there are no increases as far as busing or personnel or anything like that, but it's because in years past, they have done funding holidays for health insurance, and those days are gone, I guess, to put it basically. The fund balance is getting low, and we felt there's a fiduciary responsibility to have an adequate fund balance, so that budget will be circulated among the member school districts and voted on. The report, at least from what I understand, is the county superintendents are supportive of it, and we'll be voting on it in January.
Losan, is the increase the expense increase, and is that also reflected in tuition? In years past, it's kind of, we've seen an increase in the total expenditure, but we didn't see an increase in tuition. What's the status this time?
I'm not sure I know how to answer that question, Joel. Let me clarify that and look at my paperwork and get back to you on that. I'm not sure unless you can quickly answer.
Yeah, I reflected an increase in the budget. I see what you're looking at. That's exactly what I had too. Our number did go up, but and I can ask Mr. Boyer more specific if he can relate it to tuition, or is it truly because our numbers went up?
Yeah, why don't you do that? Get clarification from him. I had to get clarification myself. They're projecting that we'll have 61.57 students there next year. I asked what a 57.57 student looks like.
You don't want to see that.
But
it's not pretty.
Yeah, there you go. But that's not arithmetic, I don't think. Anyway, you'll do that. That would be
I will, and I'll put that out in an email to the board.
Yeah, thank you. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. I would like to thank everybody for sitting with us tonight. and you have the board meeting schedule posted online, and this will be your last opportunity for public comment. All comments and questions will be addressed to the president. Board and staff members will not normally respond. You're coming up, come on back.
Jamie Evans, 138 Lisa Lane. Just wanted to thank all the board members for returning, and I know it's a thankless job, so thank you. Just a couple things with the calendar, just that was in discussion. We did discuss at Fireside, we had a great Fireside chat, and we did talk about just the ever-increasing demands on all positions in the school district. So those half-days, I know it's once a month, we saw that as a big takeaway from that, and that time well spent, so we appreciate that and hope you support that. As far as we always did work the 23rd of December, unless it fell like this year, where it's yeah, right. But if it was within that week, like this year, we're out the 20th because it falls on a Monday. But we always did, so I hear you on that, and agree with you. But I just wanted to mention last year, Dr. Williams did ask us, the association, to do a survey, and overwhelmingly the number one takeaway was today, the Monday after Thanksgiving, and I saw that was switched with December 23rd. So from a staff point of view or a teacher point of view, the Monday after Thanksgiving is important to us. Just it's that extra, Thursday, Friday, Saturday is busy, and then Sunday then becomes prep for Monday. So then it really becomes a 3-day vacation. So this day is kind of like lets us prep for and it's nice to come back to a 4-day week. So it's not really about the hunting anymore, but I think it helps the students who work. Businesses are busy, so it gives them another chance to work during the day. So just to reconsider that Monday, I know that's important to the teachers. So thank you.